Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Dill. Monster fall camp coming for Brent Venables and the Oklahoma Sooners. We've been saying it all off season long. I don't think many people appreciate the upside, the ceiling that this Oklahoma football team has. If things shake out the right way for Oklahoma, and you told me we're looking at a 10-2 Oklahoma team that's making the college football playoffs, I don't think that's all that crazy. But at the same time, look, we could be talking about 6-6 Oklahoma team as well if things don't go right, specifically on the offensive line. We're going to figure out a lot about this football team over the next couple of weeks. Still, it seems like every position on the offensive line is up for grabs for Oklahoma. That's where I want to start. Want to sprinkle around some other positions as well. Look, before we get into it, as always, to the Oklahoma fans, one, if you all are taking your time out of your Friday nights to listen to the boys talk some Oklahoma football, discuss the two deep on the offensive line, we appreciate you guys. But much more importantly, the amount of support's been amazing that y'all have shown the fellas all summer long. Appreciate y'all. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, call your shot in the comment section. Though we're going to call our shots as well at some of these position battles. Let it fly in the comment section. We'll obviously talk a lot about this football team over the next couple of weeks. Though without further ado, you can't really bury the lead here. What's the starting five going to look like? And I'll ask you this question. Do you think it's fair to say the interior of the offensive line have a quiet confidence that that's not going to be a problem for Oklahoma? No, I know there's some position battles that need to shake themselves out, regardless of what it looks like on the inside. Quiet confidence that it's going to be pretty dang good, or at least solid. It ain't going to be a liability. Though I'm looking at the tackles. That is the question, and we said it all year. Look, I'm not looking for this Oklahoma offensive line to be top 10 in the country. They don't need to be top 10 in the country to do what they want to do in 2025, but it can't be the liability it was in 2024. When you look at the tackle battle, we'll start on the left side. How do you see it shaking out? Who do you think is going to be the week one starter for Oklahoma to open up 2025?
And I think this is about as true of a three-way
I
battle
agree.
as you'll
I
see in
agree.
college football. Because I mean, you saw the way they bounced Sexton and Howland around last year. Like they clearly don't have a ton of confidence in either of those guys, and neither of them did a ton, I'd say, to
Yeah.
inspire a ton of confidence. Like that was a position that struggled pretty much wall to wall for that Oklahoma team. And I don't know that either Sexton or Howland have the capability of being a great left tackle. Like just athletically, they don't totally possess
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
That's why you're looking at the blue and Michael Fasusi, and like they push their chips in. I mean, you talk about battling for a recruit, making sure you keep him in the class. That's what Oklahoma did for Michael Fasusi last year in the 2025 cycle. I think there's a reason for that, and I would not be surprised in the slightest to see him step on the field. And frankly, if I'm an Oklahoma fan, that's who I want to see trot out there
Dude,
week one because
we're
he's
we're
the only guy who
hearing
has it.
we're hearing all the right things from this kid. And until I said this before we went live, I'll point it out. Many of the Oklahoma fans who've been rocking with the boys, y'all know we're Michigan fans. We got a big week 2 matchup between these two programs. The similarities between these two programs, spooky to say the least. I mean, dreadful offenses last year. We got new quarterbacks for both programs, new offensive coordinators for both programs, and two true freshman left tackles in Andrew Babaloa at Michigan and Mike Fasusi very well making starts early. They could be both starting in this football game week 2. Dill, I kind of agree with you. I think Jacob Sexton, and let me be very clear, a healthy Jacob Sexton, I think he can be solid. I don't think he's going to be a top 10 NFL draft pick, but I think he can be solid. I think you could probably say the same thing for Logan Howland. But if you are thinking about getting elite left tackle play, it's coming from Mike Fasusi, and there ain't no doubt about it.
But I'm not convinced you're going to get solid from Sexton or Howland. And frankly, if Sexton
Yeah,
loses the left tackle job, I think he's a very good guard. And I think he will
okay.
grab one of the starting spots if he does lose that battle. I just don't know. I mean, I feel like you saw enough. You got enough chances from both those guys to play pretty decent football. And I just frankly don't think he got it. I don't want to like make it be overly dramatic, but I do think Michael Fasusi being able to be ready week one is big for
Yeah,
this Oklahoma team ceiling, I'd probably say.
that's That's the best way to put it. I would agree because you would. I'm not as out on maybe a Logan Holland because I think he's young and I think there's some development that still can take place. But I do agree with you when you are closing your eyes and envisioning that 10-2 ceiling. It's probably with Mike Fasusi being one of the more impressive true freshmen that we see in the country, which is very, very much in the cards for Oklahoma. Right side of the offensive line. Look, I gotta put my hand up and eat it, man. When Derek Simmons and I very rarely take a pessimistic approach to transfer portal additions. I'm a glass half full kind of guy, Dill. I questioned Derek Simmons. I just wasn't sure if that's an SEC tackle. That's probably why I'm sitting in my basement doing this Friday night, not getting paid the big bucks to evaluate talent. Everything we've heard about Derek Simmons sounds like he's the best option at right tackle, and it sounds like Oklahoma is really happy with what they have. And Dill, I'll say this: I don't think it's just coach speak because go back to last year, it was like they were desperately in fall camp trying to figure it out, and I think they knew it was going to be a problem. It sounds like there's some quiet confidence that Derek Simmons can make that transition from the FCS to the SEC, be a solid right tackle for Oklahoma in
And
2025.
he's a guy that, again, I don't know that he's an elite athlete necessarily at tackle, but he is huge. I think he's a good enough athlete. And I think like the combination of that, like you don't need to be a premier athlete if you are really, really big. And Derek
Yeah.
Simmons, I feel like at his size, moves well enough to be a fine right tackle for this team. And I think he'll be quite a bit better than what they got last year. Unless again, Jake Taylor's one that I'm not as out on him probably as I am as maybe a Jacob Sexton, Logan Howland, like
Wow.
athletically. I
Okay.
still like what Jake Taylor can do. It didn't play very well last year at all. He's the one I look at. I do think the traits are kind of there a little bit more for him, maybe
Dude,
now.
there's a lot of blue chip talent in this room. And here's the thing that I don't think we're talking enough about. Like, what can this unit do running the football? Because just as bad as they were in pass protection, they were equally as bad in getting that run game going. What's the best way to protect your offensive line and pass protection? Run the football. Stay out of those third and long situations. What is this unit in the run blocking department? I think Eddie Pierre-Louis can be a road grader. I really do. And here's the other thing I'll add before we move on. John Mateer is a quarterback that's going to make offensive lines right more often than not. You know, he's a guy that knows how to get outside the pocket, knows how to extend plays and kind of be a gamer back there. And I think for if you're an Oklahoma fan, especially when you're looking at that week 2 matchup against Michigan, look, it ain't going to be perfect. I don't see this Oklahoma offensive line just blocking up Michigan. Nobody did it last year. I don't see the Oklahoma offensive line doing that consistently. Well, you got a quarterback now that can make it work when it's not perfect up front. That's a huge storyline for Oklahoma in 2025. The wide receiver position. You feel good about one guy right now, Deion Burks, in terms of bona fide, when healthy starter and probably one of the better wide receivers in the sport. I think you had him as a top 10 wide receiver in the country, which I ain't arguing with. Giovanni Gibson, you heard all the right things from before the injury. You're hearing a lot of good things from Isaiah Satania. Dill, here's a guy we haven't talked a lot about that we might need to be starting to talk about, Zion Kearney, going into year 2. And that's 6'2", 210, 10.89 in the 100-meter dash. That is a physically gifted individual that I think needed a little bit development as a wide receiver. Well, maybe you get that from him in year 2. I'll put you on the spot. Starting 3 wide receivers for Oklahoma to start 2025. What you got for me? And then you can throw in a dark horse as well if you got one.
I think you got the three, and tell you this: Giovanni Gibson might be like we talked the Susie being one of the more important players on this team.
Mm-hmm.
I think Giovanni Gibson is
I
right
agree
up
with
there
this.
with Michael Fasusi because I look I mean, Ivan Carrion is a guy who I
I
thought
love
was
him.
awesome in Navy. I
Yeah.
feel like you haven't necessarily heard a ton out of like spring
Yeah.
practice and like some of the offseason stuff.
Yep.
But a guy who I thought like big, physically imposing, was getting himself open well against Navy. He's a guy I kind of look at. But Giovanni Gibson, again, he was kind of the guy out of the portal this year for this team.
Yeah.
He needs to be able to take that jump from Arkansas Pine Bluff and make it happen. Because he probably is, aside from Deion Burks, the next guy who I look at and can be really
Dude,
good.
and another guy that I know he's dealing with the injury, but another guy that it sounded like it was a hit for Oklahoma in the portal. Oklahoma did not do a lot of hitting in the portal last year. It sounds like we might have a few more hits with this roster going into 2025. Dill, I got an interesting one. the young edge rushers, right? We know we got one of the best in the country in our Mason Thomas. Loved how he talked about improving in the run game going into 2025. If he does that, he's going to be a top 20 NFL draft pick, top 32 maybe. Marvin Jones Jr., a guy that I think there's some more juice left to be squeezed with Marvin Jones Jr. too, if we're being honest. My question is, all right, Danny Okoye, PJ Adebawore, are they ready, man? Are they ready to take that step? I think we got two good edge rushers who can challenge, who can push Marvin Jones Jr. in this 2025 season for snaps. I think many Oklahoma fans saying, hey, year 3, it's got to be PJ going into year 3. If it ain't year 3, it might not happen for PJ at Oklahoma.
Well, look, I mean, I think you look at who could. Nigel Smith's kind of a guy I look at in terms like the skill set. I think complements probably what our Mason Thomas does, maybe a little more.
He's a big boy now, though.
That's what I'm. Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't mind that because our Mason Thomas, you know what he is as a pass rusher. I mean, he's a relatively small defensive end, though. I look at like kind of bringing that physicality that guys like Downs brought to that defensive end room. PJ Adebawore and Danny Okoye kind of similar in terms of like more NASCAR race car pass rushers.
Yeah, sure.
You know? Nigel Smith's kind of a guy I look at and could really like to see a good year out of him. And
do you think how much edge do you think he plays? Because I have him listed at the edge. I'm like, I think he's pushing.
Oklahoma plays big edges. I mean,
right.
Bothroyd was playing a little bit of edge for them. You look at Ethan Downs, like big physical edges in the past. Like,
yeah, you know, the Rondell Bothroyd comp for Nigel, that might make some sense. I'll say this. That might make sense just because I don't know how much he's going to play on the inside with those 4 that you have that are probably going to play 90% of the snaps. We'll see. Again, you talk about ceiling, and that's the best part. Like in the fall, Dill. Like when we're Michigan fans, we're only talking about ceiling. We ain't talking about worst case scenario. We talking about, hey, if it all works out, what does it look like? To me, like PJ or Danny Okoye, one of those two, like breaking out and being the freaks that we know they are athletically. That's what it looks like. Here's another in the laziest narrative around this Oklahoma team. I feel strongly about this. Linebacker room's going to struggle without Danny Stutzman. I can't tell you, Dill, how many times I have heard these national media talking heads say this. I think it's one of the strengths of this football team. I really do. Even though, like, and that ain't a shot at Danny Stutzman. I got a shirt of Danny Stutzman sitting in my closet. I live in Rochester, New York. I ain't got no connection to Oklahoma. I'm a Danny Stutzman guy. Dill, you got 4 guys. Kip Lewis, Kobe McKenzie, Kendall Daniel, Samio. Brent Venables now has a challenge, and I don't think there's any coach equipped to deal with this challenge. How do you maximize all 4 of these guys? Give you the T-box here. Who do you think plays the bulk of the snaps at this off-ball backer position?
I think Kip Lewis is going to be the one, and I think he's going to kind of assert himself as like the Danny Stutzman replacement. A guy, I don't think he's coming off the field a ton. I think then you kind of look, Samio, Daniels, and McKenzie, I imagine, like, rotate through based on a bit of a situation. Like, okay, if you want to go a little more athletic, you probably go Daniels or Samio. You want to go physical, you probably go Kobe McKenzie. So I look, Kip Lewis to me is going to be the guy. I think he will be like the heartbeat of that interior or that front 7, let's say, like kind of the guy there. I think everyone else kind of rotate in through.
And you can play one of them at the cheetah spot. And I know I think I misspelled Kendall Dolby's name. They're horrible. But Kendall Dolby's kind of a hard guy to take off the football field too, you know, when healthy.
No, I don't think he can. Kendall Dolby is awesome. Like,
yeah, but I look at Kendall Daniels and be like, you got aggressive to bring him in the winter. You didn't do that not to play this kid. And so what does it look like? I don't have the answers. Again, this is why I'm sitting in my basement in Rochester, New York. Brent Venables, the guy. How do you get these kids on the football field, and how do you put them all in spots to be? Because I really do think this linebacker room loaded with some athletic profiles. Now you just got to go maximize these guys. I think it's one of the better linebacker rooms in the country. And I know nobody else is saying that because they're all very concerned about the lack of Danny Stutzman's name being on this list. I think it's a really good unit. Cornerback battle. I want to get my take. Kendall Daniels. I think this kid is a stud. And so I think he's going to play a lot more than many Oklahoma fans probably expect. He can do it all. Rush off the edge, fit to run from the off-ball spot, drop back in coverage. I mean, played a lot of safety at Oklahoma State to start his career. This is that versatile chess piece that Brent Venables freaking loves in his defense. 5, cornerback battle. A little bit of a concern from a depth standpoint. Eli Bowen was awesome last year. You probably have a little bit of a position battle with Jacoby Johnson and Gentry Williams. Gentry Williams probably going to get the start if he is healthy, because I think he can play when he's healthy. Keep an eye on this true freshman, Cortland Guillory. Not a guy that I pegged as an early contributor, but I didn't peg Eli Bowen as an early contributor 12 months ago either. Dill, he's going to play. He needs to be ready, because I look at it and say, you got 3 cornerbacks you trust. You probably want that number to be 4. I think that's got to be Cortland as a true freshman here.
And especially with Gentry at Williams in terms of his injury struggles.
I
Like,
agree.
the
Very
guy
good
you
point.
can totally depend on to give you 12 games not being injured, because it's not really been the case throughout his career. Now,
Yeah,
he's a guy, and I've seen the Oklahoma fans in the comments kind of gassing him up.
I
I'm kind of
agree.
with that. I think he
Yeah.
is so talented. He's big.
Yeah.
He can play physical. He can be a little bit sticky. He's a guy that I'd love to see a good, healthy year from, because him and frankly Eli Bowen could be a real nails combo at that corner spot.
Super important position, because if you want to maximize this defensive line and what they can do rushing the passer, you got to have some sticky cornerbacks. And let's just be frank about it. This is a new look SEC, man. Like, there are some dudes at the wide receiver position. You need dudes to cover those dudes. And again, you don't want it to be a situation where our secondary struggles so much that our pass rush can't get home. Really important. I think they got the guys. It's important that Cortland's ready, because there's just not a ton of depth in this room. It's one of those teams, and this is what should excite Oklahoma fans. It's one of those teams that when you close your eyes and you think about best case scenario, it's a very good football team. Dill, like, if you're a Kentucky fan, and hopefully they ain't no Kentucky fans listening to this, like, when you close your eyes and you're a Kentucky fan, you vision best case scenario, you're going 7-5. Like, it's what's fun about Oklahoma this year is they got some serious upside to this football team if some of these things come together. All right, we'll get out of here on that. Appreciate you guys rocking with it again. Friday night. Nothing the boys would rather be doing with our Friday night than talking some Sooners football. Appreciate you guys. We going to talk to y'all later. Peace.